So for these next few minutes, let's talk about what happened in Cleveland. My goodness, it was awful. They were terrible, absolutely terrible in Cleveland over this last weekend. They were swept by Cleveland. It was supposed to be a 4-game series, which they most likely would have gotten swept in because they had a bullpen day on Sunday against Shane Bieber. But mercifully, they were rained out on Sunday, which is just a blessing in disguise because we got to go in to the All-Star break on a 4-game losing streak instead of a 5-game losing streak. It seems like forever ago, absolutely forever ago, that the Tigers swept the Guardians at Comerica Park. Forever ago. But here we are, about a week and a half later, 2 weeks later, and they lose a 4-game series to the Royals. They split a series with the Chicago White Sox, and then they lose a 4-turned-into-3-game series with the Guardians. And it was much of the same of what we've said over the entire first half. This team just cannot hit the ball when they need to. They really struggle to get runners home from in scoring position. It's just brutal. Michael Pineda talks about it being the worst start of his life, and you got to sit there and think, yeah, you know what, Michael? It absolutely was the worst start of your life because it couldn't have been much worse. He'd get 2 strikes on a guy and can't put him away. Can't strike him out. Not to mention the game that got blown in between there on Friday, but by Fulmer struggles. You have the lead, you claw back, you score 4 runs in I think it was the 4th or 5th inning, and you really put the pressure on them, and then you end up losing that game. That's not a game that you should lose. Not a game, especially after the the Guardians had gone up 3-0 real quick in the first inning, and then you called back because Reilly Green is phenomenal and has been phenomenal, and yet you end up losing that game because you have relied so much on your bullpen. And the bullpen has been fantastic. Okay, there's no reason to doubt the bullpen except for when they have to be overextended, except for when they're constantly being asked to get 4 or 5 innings a game. I mean, Faedo didn't pitch. I'm sorry. It was, I don't even remember who it was in the first game, to be honest with you. But it was Rodriguez. It was Elvin Rodriguez asking for a lot of innings. Drew Hutchinson the next day asking for a lot of innings. And then Pineda, he was out after 2-3 innings, just of absolute brutality against our starting pitching staff. And that's what the Guardians have done all season. It's why they are second place in the divisions, because they create havoc and they cause problems on the base paths and have just done a phenomenal job putting pressure on defenses. And the worst thing about it is that they have one of the youngest rosters in all of Major League Baseball, but yet they're playing good and competitive baseball, which again goes to this whole rebuild idea for the Tigers. Like, where are we at with this thing? We thought it was over. We thought the signing of Eduardo Rodriguez, and we thought the signing of Javier Baez, and we thought that the trade for Austin Meadows really was going to make a difference on this team. Rodriguez hasn't pitched since May, and nobody really knows where he's at. Nobody has even heard from him. Then we also have a situation where Meadows hasn't played much because of his ailments, and Javi is finally starting to hit the ball, but it's just been a struggle. It has not been a good first half. It has not been a situation where, as a fan, you sit back here and you go, I'm proud of this team. I'm glad for their effort. No, not at all. The effort on most days, yeah, they have some scrappy moments for sure. But my goodness, it's been terrible. You're 18 games. 18 games under 500. 18 games under 500. Not going to even improve upon your record from last year because you've been that bad. And yes, look, we can sit here and we can blame injuries, but guess what? Every team deals with injuries. We could sit here and blame player struggles. I get that. Paul Robinson, thank you for the first comment from Facebook saying that Meadows is in witness protection. I don't know if it's Meadows in witness protection or if it's actually Eduardo Rodriguez in witness protection. And yeah, it's not been good. But back to what I was saying, we could blame player struggles, but players slump. Okay, it happens. Now, do they all slump at the same time? Not generally. The amazing thing of seeing averages, and I'm not a huge batting average guy. I like a lot more predictive and analytical stats when it comes to offensive production. But when you post a starting lineup and their averages are all sub 250, it's brutal. And then you put a guy like Victor Reyes, who's growing on me, I'm not going to lie, into the starting lineup, and he's got the best average. Again, not that I'm hanging everything on average, but he's got the best average in the lineup. It's just brutal. Just absolutely brutal. But Paul, I appreciate your comment. You're on the fire Avila bandwagon, as I think 90% of Detroit Tigers fans are as well, because look, the proof is in the pudding. Today's a day of remembrance for Detroit Tigers fans. If you remember, July 18th, 2017, and I only know this because of Facebook memories, so thanks for that, Facebook. But today's the day that JD Martinez was traded to the Arizona Diamondbacks. What do we have to show for that trade? Nothing. Nothing to show for that trade. We had Joel Lugo. We had Sergio Alcantara. We have Jose King, who was 18 years old when the deal was made. And now he's 23 years old and hasn't made it above A-ball. That's what we got for JD Martinez? Save me, the market was bad. Save me, the market was bad. Rick Hahn in Chicago got a heck of a return for Jose Quintana when his deal was expiring. Sure, he's a lefty pitcher. I get that. He was dominating at the time. But let's talk about the pitcher that we had that was dominating at the time, named Justin Verlander. What did we get in return for that? In the same year, 2017. Franklin Perez, who's pitched a total of 26 innings in 5 years. Jake Rogers, who's down with Tommy John surgery. And okay, the verdict's still out on him. Daz Cameron, who's maybe a fourth outfielder. Probably a AAA player on a good team. That's what we have to show. Not to mention the other trade pieces like the Justin Uptons and the Ian Kinslers and the Nick Castellanos that we also traded. Even our dominant lefty closer, Justin Wilson. And we got a return for him. Okay, Candelario, he's been really the only impact from the trades that Avila has made. And he's been decent if you average out his 162 game averages. He's a solid MLB player, but not majorly impactful. We also got Isaac Paredes, who we flipped for Austin Meadows. Okay, fantastic. But it's just been brutal. Like, this rebuild did not have to take this long. And it's something there. I know there was an article, an editorial written by Bob Herman from our editorial staff at Detroit Sports Nation about Al Avila and about this rebuild and about how the Baltimore Orioles rebuild started a year after us. A year after the Tigers. They beat us in the 2014 playoffs. They last made the playoffs in 2016. We'll throw 2017 in there because that was their first losing season after making the playoffs. So whether they were going for it or not, their sell-off and their rebuild began in 2018. And yet they just ripped off, 21 out of 30 games, are above 500 for the first time in a long time at the All-Star break, because they drafted, because they signed correctly. And I don't know, it's really hard to say this rebuild's over. Great. Because if this rebuild is over and this is the product we built to, somebody didn't do their job at all. Because we are 18 games under 500 at the All-Star break. Quite possibly picking number 1 overall in the MLB draft next season. We are not a good baseball team. The Tigers have 37 wins right now. That is 6 more than the Nationals, 3 more than the Reds, and 5 more than the Athletics, and 1 more than the Royals. So if the draft for next year were to happen today, we'd be picking 5th again. There's got to be some kind of penance for picking in the top 5, 8 of a draft multiple consecutive years in a row. Something's got to be done. And the hashtag fire Avila, I'm all for it. Let's get to some comments, okay? Paul's in there. Don't forget that if you want to have a conversation about the rebuild, about the Tigers, about how disappointed you are in the first half of the season, about the home run derby that we're going to be watching live. I got it live right in front of me here, where I'm going to be just talking about the players and reacting to what's going on, because this is one of my favorite events. I'd love to have that conversation with you in the comments. But Paul Robinson, again, here we go. He says, nothing to show for JD, JV, Upton, Avila, all but character assassinated Castellanos trade value. Yeah, there's some truth to that. Talent, he says, goes on and says, talent evaluation has been so bad, it's made the Orioles look like rocket scientists in comparison. There's a little bit of truth there, but our player development's getting a little bit better. It's just now we have to wait for that even longer. Tigers have not been in the playoffs for 8 years. They had a chance in, was it 2016, I think it was, when they lost on the last day of the season to the Atlanta Braves to lose out on a wild card spot. They wouldn't have done anything in those playoffs, but you never know. You get in the dance, you never know. But it's just concerning that a rebuild like this is taking as long as it is. It didn't have to. I was reminiscing. I told you that today's the anniversary of JD Martinez being traded, and I wrote back then in 2017 for Detroit Sports Nation, I wrote an article about how this rebuild did not have to take that long. It didn't, because of the assets that you had. The assets that you had, again, okay, Verlander had a bloated contract. Yeah, but he was also controllable for 3 years. And that was the return that we got? Kinsler. Fantastic second baseman. Wasn't hitting as great when he got traded, but okay. Still, that was the return that you got? Justin Upton, who played himself into a trade chip, by the way. That was the return that you got? Castellanos got Alex Lang. Alex Lang's been pretty good for us this season, so I'm not going to harp on that one too much. But at the end of the day, you held on to Matt Boyd too long. You held on to Michael Fulmer too long. Daniel Norris never panned out. You had assets to trade that could have led to a much quicker turnaround and a non-depleted position player pool when you call 2 prospects up. Everybody wants to talk about how great the Tigers farm system was. That Al Avila took over a terrible farm system. And he did, okay? Let's call facts, right? If it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's a freaking duck. And the farm system was bad. 100%. Dave Dombrowski traded everybody away trying to push for that world championship. You can blame him a little bit if you want, but at least he went for it. But Avila then slowly is rebuilding the farm system. And we got to the top end of the league. But really, that top end of the league was propped up by 4 or 5 players. Faedo, Manning, Mize, Green when he got there, and then Torkelson. Once they graduated out, the farm system's dropping. We don't have a top farm system anymore. It's propped up on 5 players. That's very difficult to call a rebuild a success when you've built to nothing. You're not any better now than you were 2 years ago.
Man on a mission, I'ma get it. You know I be on a what? Yeah. You know I be on a